All right. So keyboard interaction is pretty similar to the mouse interaction that we looked at a few weeks ago. But obviously with the keyboard, we have different types of input. So it's similar to our mouse click, but we have different keys. So besides detecting when a keyboard key is pressed, we also want to be able to detect what key it is. And that can be used for any different type of interaction that you might want to use in your sketch. What we'll do on Wednesday is use key presses to trigger sounds. And so we'll make a little kind of like sound sampler. It's based on a project that is in the inspiration section, which I may have shown before in class. And I'm not sure if my audio is on. Okay. So yeah, this is a pretty simple project that just displays different animations associated with different key presses and sounds. And so you can kind of make this little collage of sound. So we'll be making something kind of similar to this, a simplified version of this between today and Wednesday. And so we'll start with our keyboard interaction part. And we're going to be using more environmental variables. So things, remember we have like width and height and mouse X and mouse Y. We can use key is pressed and the keys to get the information from the keyboard, which P5 provides for us. So if we go to the P5 reference, this is also under events. So we've already looked at a lot of the mouse events over here, but you can see there's also keyboard events, and they kind of look similar. Key is pressed kind of looks similar to mouse is pressed, and the is pressed kind of implies this Boolean value. It's either true or false, either a key is pressed or not. And then the key and key code are sort of like mouse X and mouse Y. They tell us which key has been pressed, either by the key value, like A or B or C, or the key code number, which I probably have a link to that, but we can go ahead and open up. There's a website, keycodes.info. Oh, maybe it's gone. Let's see. Oh, it's just keycode.info. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yes. So it has a slightly different style, but this is what it looks like. And so if I hit the A key, it shows me the 65 is actually the value that's encoded on the computer for which key on the keyboard that is. Space is 32, enter is 13, 1 is 49. And so we used to have to refer to the number in JavaScript using the event, but they've added stuff over the years, so it's easier to reference things. So we can use the key code that looks like this, because there's different ones, like there's capital A versus A. And then it also shows us other information, like you can see this meta key area. If I do Shift A, you see the shift. If I do Control A, see the control, Option A, and then I guess on a Mac, or this thing is like a Mac key, but I think it might be the Windows. Yeah, the meta key, although that also opens my Windows. And you can see all the information that we get from the browser through JavaScript. And P5 kind of gives us an interface to that information. And then we also have some functions, key press, key release, key type, key is down. Those are like the mouse press functions where we have to put that function on its own. And that is like a specific event in time that we can write some code to respond to. So we'll start with key is pressed. This is just a Boolean value. And so in my sketch, I just want to demonstrate. So I'm just going to make a really simple change. So if the background is normally gray, I'll say if So I'm using a conditional, and I can just say key is pressed. And you can see, excuse me, that turns pink because, P5 knows that it's a specific variable that already exists. And so I can say if the key is pressed, let's change the background color. Let's change it to plum. And so now if I press a key, the background color changes. And it doesn't really matter which key I'm pressing, like if I hit enter or space. This is just if any key is pressed or not. And we can look at the value. So I'm going to put key is pressed as text onto the canvas. Okay, so you can see that little false up there. It's kind of hard to see. Let's make that a bit bigger. Okay, so if I hit a key, then false turns into true. And so that's really all that value key is pressed stores is true or false whether or not any key on the keyboard is pressed. So if we know the key is pressed, we can also determine what key is being pressed. And we can use the key or the key code value to determine that. So let's start just by displaying the key. So say key here. And oops. The tricky part with this one is for these examples, I have to make sure to click on the canvas for the key presses to work. Because until I click on the canvas, the browser focus is still in here. So if I hit like the A key, it just adds it to my code, which is not what I want. So when I run a sketch using key commit or key events, I have to click on the canvas to make sure the browser switches focus to the canvas. So if I hit A, we can see A, and we can see the key value stays the same, even though I'm no longer pressing the key. So it really shows us the last key value. I'm hitting space here, and there's nothing there because it's a space. So we could also look at the key code. Let's put that on here as well. Oops. So the space is 32. Enter is 13. A is 65, 66, 67. 1 is 49. So the computer has like a mapping for all the different keys to specific numbers. And so then if we want to make decisions based on which key is being pressed, then we can change our conditional statement to update which key we want to use. So there's a couple ways I could do this. I could use a compound conditional. So I could say if key is pressed, double ampersand, and key equals, let's say, P for plum. So now if I hit P, I get the plum background. But if I hit N or M or A or X, the background stays the same. So that's good if I only have one option there, because I can test those conditions at the same time. But if I want to have more colors, then I have to kind of repeat this again. So I'd have to say if key is pressed and key equals, let's say B, background is blue. Okay, so now that works, but my code looks kind of gross now because I'm using this same thing twice. I don't really need to do that. So when I'm writing code, I want to try to make things more efficient. So in both of these cases, the key has to be pressed. So instead of using two compound conditionals, what I can just do is use a nested conditional. So once I'm inside key is pressed, I can just ask again and then put my conditions in here, and I can save a little bit of repetition in my code. So now I'm inside if key is pressed, and if that key is pressed, I can have more conditions. If key equals P, I get plum. if key is B, I get blue. But I'm using the triple equal sign. I don't know if I think we've talked about it, but I don't generally use it. This is kind of saying like it's the same value and it's also the same type. So it's good to use that when you're evaluating certain values like strings or pretty much any value really. The triple equal sign, it's really the same thing as the double equal sign, but it's also saying it has to be the same type. So they both have to be strings. So now I get the same thing. P is plum and B is blue, but now I don't have to repeat my if key is pressed. So it's a little bit more efficient. Although arguably now I have three ifs instead of two ifs. But if I want to add more colors, I can say, let's say G for background is green. So now I'd have to, repeat the whole thing again. So overall, it's more efficient to nest those conditional statements. And if you wanted to do a lot of colors, there's more efficient ways to do it. But if you only want to do 3 colors, this is a perfectly acceptable way to approach it. Any questions so far? Okay. So we also have Keycode, which we can see here. So I can compare keycodes. So if I wanted to use enter, I could say if key equals 13 for enter. Then let's do the background is, let's do gold. And I forgot to write key code. I just wrote key. So this is key code. And I think these days, most of the key values are in all the browsers, but I think it used to be safer to use key codes because they were going to be the same in every browser. Versus the keys, I think the value is different. Like this is like capital E, enter. I'm not sure if it's different in other browsers, but the key code is always the same. So sometimes it's safer to use the key code. But if we're using P5, you can get away with these, with the key value. So then we have the Keypressed function. And this is a function that will trigger, will happen in a specific event rather than change of state. So when I press the P key, that changes the key value and it stays changed. And if I'm pressing a key, the key value is either pressed or it's not, but that is a consistent state. Whereas if I write my keypress function, so if I say function keypressed, that is going to happen at the moment that I press the key. And a key press is actually both a key. Wait, let me read what it is. This is when the key is pressed. Okay, so I think it's just when you press that down the key. Key release is when you release the key. So it's actually 2 separate events when you press down and then when you release. And depending on what kind of thing you're making, you may want to tie an event either to the key down or the key release. So if you're writing like a video game, you probably want things to happen as soon as you hit the key. But if you're making some kind of user interface, people probably expect, when I hit save, they probably expect the save to actually occur after you release the button. Maybe you change your mind and hit escape or something like that. But so for key pressed, why don't we use save? So we can just save the canvas. So I'll save key example.png. And so I have to click on the canvas to get focus first, but if I hit enter, it'll save that image for me. So there it is, pretty exciting. This happens as soon as I press the key. So you can see if I hit, even though I'm still holding the key down, it's already saved. Whereas if I change this to key released, if I hit the keyboard, it hasn't saved yet, and I'm still holding the enter key. And then when I release the enter key, now it saves the image. Yeah, typically, I mean, it depends on like the interface. It's something that you won't really notice until you start thinking about it. But like, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like we could even test with Google. Like if I write like, if I'm just Googling something, like if I go here and I type like key codes and I hit enter, so it goes immediately when I hit enter. I didn't release the key; it had already gone to this website. Trying to think if there's something that wouldn't do that. This one, when I hit the search here, it doesn't go until I release the mouse, which is kind of interesting. Whereas here, if I hit enter, it just goes automatically. So yeah, I'm not really sure. Like if I hit this sign in button, see it's holding, and then when I release, it actually goes to the sign in. Let's see if that happens if I use the tab. So if I have tab focused the website, and if I hit enter, it just goes straight away. So yeah, it depends on, so it's set up, at least on Google, it's set up so it just goes immediately. Maybe if you're like writing an email and you hit enter, it'll wait until you release before it actually sends it. Trying to think of examples where you would want to wait. Uh, let's see. Yeah, it goes straight to sign in. I'm not really sure. Uh, but you can choose which one you think makes more sense. All right, so we already talked about key release. Let's see if there's anything else I have to go over. So there's also key typed and key is down. I don't know what the difference is. Key typed is called once every time a key is pressed, except for some keys. Huh. Oh, key typed will keep going if I hold the key down. So if for some reason you want it to keep going, so like if I do function key typed, I'm just going to log here because I don't want to save a bunch of images. And we can just log the key info. So actually, I'll do both here so we can see the difference. Okay, so the difference with these is that it keeps repeating the key typed. So if I hit enter, oh, no, it's not repeating. Huh. Not that it would repeat. Let's see. Cause multiple calls. Maybe the console is hiding it. Let's check the console. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so I'm not sure if that's a bug or if that's intentional, but that should be the difference. And then key is down. Oh, this is a slightly different function where you can ask if a specific key is down. So this would actually be a more efficient way to do our background thing here, where you can ask if a key is pressed and what the key is at the same time. So we could add another background. We could say if key is down, and then we can give it a code. So it has to be one of the codes. So let's give it 32 for space, and then we could change the background to red. So that is going to tell us if the key is down and which key it is at the same time. And that works pretty well. So that's just the space versus my other keys. So that's a more efficient way to do if key is pressed and if key equals P, but it only works with the key codes. So you can put the key code in as an argument here, and then that turns into either true or false. All right, I think that is everything for our keys. So I'm going to stop recording.